Welcome to From Caving In to Crushing It, the podcast for those who find themselves immersed in adversity and choose to write their story instead of having others write it for them. I'm Drew Durrani, and I'm your host. Mike Van Pelt, good to see you, true man.
It's good to see you, Drew. How's it going, man?
It's going well. It's going well. Better now that we finally got time to sit down and talk. And I want to share this with the world because the world needs to know who Mike Van Pelt is. So I'm going to get right to it. Life is not linear. We all know that. And I really want. What's that?
Wish that was the case.
Yeah, I wish it was, right? You press a button, the easy button from Staples. Yeah. We know it's not. And I really want to get to know the essence of Mike Van Pelt. And so give me something in your life that really moved you to really become who you are now. Maybe you got your head out of the sand or the aha moment or something, because we all have that moment.
You know, for me, in my adult life, there was a point where, if you recall back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that's when technology was pushing, man. The internet was coming along. People were moving from dial-up to DSL. I actually sold that for a while. And if you were really lucky in a business, you got a T1 line. Woohoo!
I remember that.
So, technology was really moving along, and I had been involved in that business, and there were a lot of startup companies, and one would come along, they'd run out of money and they'd go out of business, and so there was a lot of that going on. And really what I was looking for was a little bit more certainty. And so I fell into the insurance world, and it was good for a while. And then my wife and I moved to South Carolina, and I really hoped I could find a sage gentleman that might be 5 years or so from retirement, who could really bring me into the business and teach me about things. But somewhere along that lines, I got out of focus and I got broad in my business and tried doing a number of different things. And when I did that, I just got lost in the shuffle and I hated what I was doing.
Wow.
And so there was a point where my wife and I have always been, especially when the kids were young, talking to them about education and the importance of education. And I realized, well, geez, you haven't completed your college education, so you're kind of a hypocrite. And it really hit me. And I remember very clearly the night I made that decision, sitting at the kitchen table with my wife and just really crocodile tears coming out of my eyes, because I thought to myself, here we go, man. This is going to be painful, but I got to start over. And that's when I went down the journey of not only getting my undergraduate degree, but getting my graduate degree. And that's really where the story begins. But that was a very pivotal moment when I knew that I needed to make a change. And, my wife was very supportive. And in fact, during that time frame, she told me to, just stay at home with the kids, be a stay-at-home dad, take care of the kids, figure out what you want to do with your life, and it'll all work out. And it took a little while to work out, though, but
that's all right. Hey, you know what? Very fortunate you had somebody supportive like that to do it.
But
so that's a great.
But that's certainly one point where I can look at in my life, and I remember it very, very clearly. What that moment felt like, and it's kind of like standing down at the bottom of the mountain and looking up and going, all right, it's time to start climbing.
Yeah. Yep. So, and you said you don't want to be a hypocrite, and that's a tough thing. I mean, I know that a lot of us are able to give good advice and hope others take it, and we can't take our own advice. So how did that?
I mastered that.
Yeah. Well, how did that hypocritical feeling feel? And tell me how you started the whole back to going the undergraduate thing and how it changed.
Well, I mean, it's I just knew I was setting off on a journey. I knew I was setting off on a journey. And, prior to that, and part of what kicked that off was had gone through a leadership program with the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. It was a 6-month program, and
Okay.
it was awesome. And I got done with that program and I went, what am I going to do next? And that's really what got me thinking about what does next look like? And that's what led to going back to school. Now, the interesting part about all that was I went back, got my undergraduate, and I had been doing also a tremendous amount of volunteer work in nonprofits.
How
A
old
lot
were you at this time, if you don't mind me asking?
uh uh right around right around 40,
Yeah.
38, 30 to 40. So right around that age when you
Yeah.
start asking a lot of deep
Yeah. A
questions.
lot of men, I was going to say, between 35 and 40, were like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. And so I went down that journey. I got my undergraduate,
Yeah.
and I had all this great volunteer experience. I tried to go back out in the workforce and I was just met with crickets.
Jeez.
And in fact, it was pretty painful. And one of the, and because I was doing all this volunteer work and because I love nonprofits and serving people, I started really looking at it. I'm like, what do these nonprofit executives have that I don't have? And I thought, well,
Yeah.
they have a graduate degree, and I only need a little bit more seasoning in some areas, so I'll go back and get that. But boy, oh boy, that made it worse because now, people are looking, yeah, now people are looking at my resume and they're going,
Yeah.
well, you've been a stay-at-home dad, you got all this education. Now, like, what am I supposed to do with you? And I thought, well, you're supposed to hire me. I mean, isn't that obvious?
Yeah, that's an obvious answer.
But what happened during that time frame, Drew, was I began to internalize those no's as I just wasn't worthy.
Oh boy. Yep.
And it became a very painful process. And I remember being on a phone call one night, and was with the university I got my degree from, and they were doing kind of a, I don't even remember what it was exactly, like how to fix your resume or how to get a job type thing.
Yeah.
And they brought a quote unquote expert on. And so the expert was talking, and I went into the chat and I asked a question. If you've had extended job loss, how do you find a job?
Yeah.
What do you put on your resume? And the gentleman responded back, well, how long have you been out of work? And I don't remember all the details, but I put it down. And the guy said, well, when I see a resume like that and they've been out of work that long, I think they probably had an alcohol problem or been in some kind of rehab.
What?
Yeah,
How inappropriate. Or,
that's serious. And I just remember sitting there stunned, right? Because I asked the question.
Yeah.
The answer came right to me. It hit me between the eyes. And I just remember sitting there in stunned disbelief that he just said that, because I'd put in a heck of a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
And I just sat there, and then I thought, I'm done here. And I logged off. And it's interesting. You have two choices in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'd already been taking the hits.
Yeah.
And at that point, I really took another one. And so, things like that, are the challenges that I think a lot of men face, because as men, we're often asked, once we get beyond what your name is, what do you do?
Absolutely.
It was really during that time frame when I didn't have an answer, which made things even worse.
Right.
Because I knew what I was capable of. I knew the titles I probably should have, but I couldn't say. And there were a handful of times where my wife and I, when we'd go to events quite often, and somebody'd say, well, what do you do? And I literally would virtually curl up in the fetal position and not have an answer.
Well, that's what we men have been trained to see our self-identity and have it tied to what we do for a living,
Yeah.
And which is not healthy, man.
No. So, those are the things that, really began driving that whole entrepreneurial journey. I didn't know it at the
Mm.
time because, right, the easy thing to go do
Yeah.
is to go get that W-2, right, and,
Right.
and get a paycheck.
Yep.
And so that was I see these things now as the breadcrumbs God laid out for me. But back then,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was a really dark thing for me to go to. And quite honestly, I kept most of that inside. Now it
Yeah.
would come out in ways like anger,
Of course.
frustration,
Hmm.
and typically when that occurred, it came out at really inopportune time.
Like when someone
Yeah.
asked you, "What do you do, Mike?"
Yeah. So, and my gut feeling is I'm not alone in these feelings. I think a lot of guys go through this.
Yeah, I think basically what you said about keeping it in, I call it suffering in silence. And
Yeah,
most men do suffer in silence. And it's time that people like you and I break that and let people know it's a strength to break that silence.
absolutely.
So how'd you handle that? How finally did you break that silence?
A lot of work.
Yeah.
I tried to surround myself with the right people. It
Hmm.
wasn't easy. I would read a lot of books,
Hmm.
self-help tapes.
Right.
But I think the interesting thing was at a certain point I decided, well, I've got the knowledge, skills, and ability. I just need to figure out how to become an entrepreneur, and I'll do my own thing. And the heck with corporate America,
Yep.
if they don't want me. And I tried uh, my hat at some business consulting, and I was at a network event and met a gentleman there by the name of Paul Bailey. And Paul and I really hit it off over this discussion about how many takers there were at a networking event we were at,
Mhm. Oh my gosh.
and
Yep.
we wanted to be a part of a giver type
Mhm.
mentality.
Right.
And so we decided we were going to do our own group, networking group, which actually quickly morphed into a men's small group.
Okay.
And the interesting part about being in a men's small group was, it wasn't affiliated with the church. And Paul and I met some people and really started getting mentored in that. And it was in that real, authentic discussions started happening.
Okay.
And it was and then I did something really crazy. I
Hmm.
went to a retreat. I went to a men's retreat weekend, and
Crazy's good. That's usually where
yeah,
the answers are. Answers are in
yeah, and
craziness.
it was really during that weekend on a Saturday morning when they played a song by Josh Groban called "You
Yeah.
Are Loved." It's not a worship song,
Right.
but the guy said, "I want you to hear this as God singing it to you."
Right.
So the words. And I heard the words, and it was really in that moment that I heard God say, "You're my beloved son, and I want
Hmm.
an intimate relationship with you." And I never had heard that in my life.
Right.
As a lifelong Christian, I didn't even know it was available.
No, I hear you.
And so that really began to trend. That was in the spring of 2019, and
Okay.
it took me a while, most of that year, to try to unpack that. But going into 2020, I had some pretty big plans.
Didn't we all?
And COVID hit.
Uh-huh. The dirty five-letter word.
Yeah. And that's where things got a little obviously we all went through something during COVID, and it
Right.
wasn't a great period to go through. On the other hand, I point back to it now and realize that period gave me a different perspective of life and an
Yeah.
opportunity to make a shift.
Yes. It's funny you say that because prior to that, right, the world didn't understand pivoting and making a shift and all that. And because of COVID and what a lot of us had to do during it,
Yeah.
now no one blinks at it or no one thinks twice.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, we all shifted, we all pivoted.
Drew, I got COVID over Christmas of 2019. And what was interesting about
Yeah.
that was we had convinced my wife's parents not to travel because of
Okay.
COVID.
Yeah.
And because her mom is a diabetic, and,
Right.
and they're a little older, and we didn't want them to risk traveling.
Right. Right.
And I even remember sitting at Christmas dinner and we were having a discussion about COVID. And I remember jokingly saying, well, I'm sure if I ever got it, I'd probably get nothing more than the sniffles. I'm a pretty healthy guy. I've never really been sick.
Yep.
Little did I know I had COVID in that moment.
In that moment. Okay.
In that moment, I'd gone 3 places during that week. And I woke up on Christmas morning and I was a little sluggish, but I just chalked it up to, well, I'm probably just relaxing. It's Christmas morning.
Yeah.
I was kind of tired all day and didn't think anything of it. The following day I woke up and I had a fever.
Okay.
And it was almost instantly. I said to my wife, I called her back to the bedroom and I said, get your parents out of here immediately. I said, I think this could be the COVID.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I went and got tested that night and I had it. And in the meantime, Drew, I was kind enough to give everybody a Christmas present, and I gave it to everybody in the house.
Oh, that was nice. Well, you teach people, you teach your kids to share. So
yeah. So, but I was down and out for about 10 days.
Wow.
It absolutely kicked my butt.
Yep.
And I've never experienced anything like that. And it was, and then when I came out of it, I was just in this brain fog. But I was very sentimental when I came out of it. And my heart almost immediately went to, man, you got a second. And don't get me wrong. I wasn't in the hospital. I wasn't, one of these people on a respirator or anything like that.
Right.
But what happened, because I was in so much leg and back pain throughout that thing, and it was odd. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. And it was almost like when I came out of it, I just remember sitting at my desk going, you know what you know what you need to do. Now figure this out.
Right.
And I, really started discerning this whole idea of a men's life coach. And now the strange part about that, I had a curveball coming at me that I didn't see coming. On June 15th of 2020, my wife was let go from the organization she was with after 14 years because of COVID. And it really set our life off on a different trajectory. And it was during that time I found somebody that actually had some coaching tools, and that's the pivot. There were some points in there where I was being introduced to people that were going to help me get to where I am now. And what a journey. It's funny to look back on that story now because 2020 seems like a long time ago.
It does. Yeah. A lot's happened since then. So.
Yeah.
So you got through the COVID and you met this gentleman and you have these tools. What'd you do next?
Well, I went through his training. And because my wife and I were trying to figure it out, Drew. I mean, when I met him, I was out looking for franchises.
Okay. All right.
Something for my wife and I to do.
Yeah, you can do it together.
And we were grasping at straws, man. Because we knew we were in a smaller area. My wife's always been involved in corporate, and we knew that the chances of us staying where we were at were not that great. And so I went, we're just looking for anything, trying to figure it out. And I found this guy online. Drew, if I tried to recreate what I did, I don't think I could do it again today, how I found that guy.
Yeah, usually happens that way.
It was a God thing. And, basically I went through his training and I said, listen, the bottom line here is that we're going to have to relocate. We know we're going to have to relocate. We don't know where, we don't know when, but a lot of, the details are going to come on me because my wife's just going to have to go to work,
And you had children at this time, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Our son was getting ready to be a senior in high school.
Oh boy.
Sophomore. So you're talking about major disruption, which is why my wife and I were trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Ultimately he said to me, Mike, when you're when you're ready, let me know, but continue going through the training and get certified. And, when it's time, we'll pull the trigger. Interestingly enough, during that time, I'd sent him a couple of blogs and he said to me, you ever thought about doing a podcast? I'm like, funny you should ask. It's kind of the ongoing joke in our men's small group that we should have recorded this group session. It would have made a great podcast. And I started looking into it and I really began the podcast. Paul and I began it together. Now it's more of me interviewing somebody like this format.
Yeah.
But it was during that time that Paul and I started the podcast. And I hired a podcast coach and just really began to fall in love with this format. And it hit me right where I was because I was curious and I wanted to learn from other people. And that's the beauty of doing podcasts and having these formats, is that you can talk with whoever you want.
Yeah.
And, so that's how the podcast began. It was really kind of a joke. And I'm not a technical guy. So, I really had a lot of fear on how to even operate some of this stuff, but, we worked through it and, gosh, wouldn't you know it? I mean, we just released the 100th episode. So
God bless. Way to go, man. 100. That's a big milestone.
it's, it's something that I've absolutely fallen in love with.
Yeah.
Primarily, you and I were talking about this before we jumped on the podcast. I mean, the amount of technology, social media out there. I mean, gosh, when I first got into sales way back when, I mean, my sales manager took me out to a building and dropped me off and made me knock on doors. Now you can't really go knock on doors. You got to find other, ways to do it. And what I love about podcasting is it gives people an opportunity to hear me and it's that know, like, trust factor.
Right.
Like, there's Mike, hey, he's a real guy. He's got real challenges like me. And, here's how he deals with it. Or I bring an expert on and we talk about it. So it's one of the reasons why I love this format.
How is the coaching going now and the podcast? How are they working together to help drive your message?
I think you find different, you figure it out as you go, Drew. I mean, this is not an area that I'm an expert in. And, what I've learned to do is, in fact, I'm learning to talk about this. There's so many different facets to it, is ask for help.
Yeah.
And go to help from people. I have some podcast people that help me edit it now. And we do biweekly calls and have strategy that we're implementing. I have a small business coach that, we develop strategies and we're trying to intertwine, not just the coaching and the podcast, but, like I'm writing a book and, working on a speaking platform and, we're trying to intertwine workshops and masterminds and there's a lot of activity going on in my world now. It's now it's fun, it's exciting, and I'm learning a lot. And but it's because I finally gave up control, Drew, and asked for help. And that's a big part of my message now.
That's a great message, Mike, and thank you for sharing and being emotionally vulnerable. It's one thing that men need to start doing more often, asking for help and being a little more emotionally vulnerable so we can get that darn help. So, all right. So I got 2 questions to end this with, and then we'll learn more about how people can reach out to you.
Yeah.
You're sitting down with young 7 to 10-year-old Mike, and you would like to give him some advice on life. What are you going to tell him?
Well, it's funny. So I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but in an upcoming book that I'm going to be a part of, collaboration book, Cracking the Rich Code, the chapter that I'm writing on is the power of asking for help.
Good for you.
And one of the reasons that I talk about that was what's interesting in you asking that question was in the article, I talk about an event that occurred in 1976 when I was 6 years old.
Okay.
And the teacher had noticed that uh, I was kind of going cross-eyed, like my
Oh,
right
wow.
eye
Uh-huh.
would go off into the corner, and I had astigmatism. Basically, they call it a lazy eye.
Yeah.
And they took me to the doctor, and they had a little projector back then, and he said, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see the moon jumping over the cow." And he went, "Whoa, hello."
Oh,
No, you're supposed to see the cow jumping over the moon.
yeah.
And he diagnosed it as a lazy eye, and then
Okay.
I had to get glasses. And the reason why that's of any interest whatsoever is 1976 in first grade, that was somewhat unusual.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
what happened as a result of that, right? You get a little bullied every once in a while, the
Yeah.
four eyes thing.
Hmm.
But where I landed was that whole stereotype of, well, you must be smart. You wear
Mm.
glasses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I rejected that notion.
Okay.
And here's how I rejected it. Since I'm smart, I can't raise my hand and ask questions. I can't go ask for help because I'm
Oh,
supposed
because
to
you're
know the answer.
smart. Yeah.
And so, I got a little behind. When I was in grade school, I was a decent student, but I started goofing off when I got in junior high. But I wouldn't ask for help.
Mm.
And I wore that as a badge of honor, well into my adulthood. I
Mhm.
was not one of these guys that went and asked for help. And, what I would tell that 6, 7 year old kid is don't buy into that BS.
Mhm. That's good.
If you
No,
have a question,
yeah,
go get help
absolutely. No, that's
because it
great.
caused me to fall behind a little bit.
Yeah. No, that's great. Absolutely great advice. All right. All right. So now you're going to ask for help. Now you're going to put a different hat on. And you're now sitting with young Mike, the businessman, soon to be entrepreneur, and you want to give him some business advice from what you've learned over your life. What are you going to tell him?
Yeah. I just wrote about this for an article that I'm going to be in. And it's almost cliche because you hear this a lot. Um, Not only ask for help, but fail fast and ask for help.
Okay.
Uh,
Explain
because
that.
you need to make you. Here's the bottom line. So many of us go through life trying to avoid failure or
Right.
avoid making mistakes. Now,
Yes.
I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I know how this
Yeah.
works
Got it.
very, very well.
Yep.
You're not going to be perfect,
Right.
and you will fail. That is a foregone conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And despite what our culture teaches us this day, accept the fact that you failed
Mm-hmm.
and figure out how to make it work. And if
Right.
you can't make it work, go ask for help.
Okay.
And I
Gotcha.
think not, if anybody who's an entrepreneur or just in life in general, I mean, you
Right.
can't be afraid to fail. You can't be afraid to fail.
You can't.
Sometimes you're going to finish second. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do you learn from it? I've lost a lot in my life. I actually remember being a part of a junior high basketball game and we lost by 100 points. Can you believe that, Drew?
Wow.
I don't even know how that happened.
That's
But
amazing.
actually, it was a JV.
Congratulations. That's a.
Yeah, it was a JV basketball game, as a matter of fact. So listen, you can't be afraid to fail. You will,
Yep.
and that's okay. And that's something that I've had to accept as an entrepreneur, because I came into this as well. Everything's got to be just right, right? I mean,
Yep.
everything's got to be right,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and it just does not work that way.
No,
And
it
quite
doesn't.
honestly, as a men's life coach, I don't think my audience wants to see everything work right, because then it provides them one of the many stories I get to tell about my Mike doing something wrong, and then he learned from it and fixed it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now you need those stories because you don't want to. You can't come across as somebody who's perfect. How are people going to grow? You can't.
No.
Well, thanks for sharing those things. So now I'm sure the audience is going to want to get more of Mike Van Pelt. So here's your opportunity to tell them how to get in touch with you and what you want them to know.
Well, I mean, you can always send me an email at Mike at truemanlifecoaching.com. But my website, we're constantly tweaking it and working on it. All my social media is out there. The podcast is on that page, truemanlifecoaching.com. The True Man podcast is on all major podcast channels, but we've got it on our website as well. And, I'm working on my solo book, True Man, True Ways, a roadmap of discovery.
Ooh, I love that title.
Masculine Heart. That'll be out this fall. But prior to that, I'm going to be in a collaborative book with speaker Jim Britt and Shark Tank star Kevin Harrington.
Okay.
Cracking the Rich Code. That should be out around June. So
great.
See, I got all kinds of things.
You have a lot going on. Good for you. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. And I really appreciate you coming on. I'm very grateful you're in my life and we're hanging out together, and I appreciate your support in what I do. And I'm here to support you in what you do. So thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Drew. Had a good time.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and give us a review to help others find it. I'd like you to answer this question. Are you living the life you want to live, or are you living the life others want you to live? I'd like you to think about that for a second, because I strongly suggest you live the life you want to live. If you want to learn more about what I stand for and my services and how I'm able to help many men get out of their own way, please go to my website at www.profitcompassion.com. Feel free to also email me at drew@profitcompassion.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Take care of yourself and choose to write your own story instead of letting others write it for you.